Hi, everyone. Welcome to Third Party, a Microsoft support show. Today, we're joined by Rodney Fournier, our Enterprise Architect Manager, and we're talking about the DSE services as they're structured at US Cloud. So I know our model integrates break-fix with a more proactive consulting approach that's driven by DSEs who are very experienced. Tell me a little bit about how the US Cloud model is constructed, and then how those two sides of the house are integrated.
That's a good question. So as the Enterprise Architect Manager, we looked at offerings that have been around for a while from various organizations, and we came up with the DSE. And the DSE stands for Designated Support Engineer. So they're an enterprise architect, but they're doing a support engineer role, basically white glove treatment for our customers. So one of the things that our goal is to build a relationship with the customer. You've had the experience where you call like your mobile provider and you get support, and you get whoever you get. Sometimes they're good. Sometimes you have to explain your situation over and over again. You call back the next day. Guess what? You talk to another person. You got to start that whole story all over again. We didn't want to give that experience to them if we could get around that. How do we do that? Is we become part of their organization. And so that's what the DSE role is they own that technology for their customer and know everything about it. And part of that is when they open up a severity 1, 2, 3, or 4, so something that's broken, a break fix ticket, and that whatever severity it is, we put an internal note on that ticket to the engineers and the break fix that look at it and say, we've got a DSE that is intimate with that technology, so they can probably skip a lot of that. What's the background look like? What's the historical, what's going on in the environment that might have led to this? The other main goal that we had is that right now technology is so converged and there's so many different things. I'm so glad that Microsoft doesn't make freeways because there's no lanes. All the cars would crash. So with all the cars crashing, if you have technologists that knows SQL, let's say, that might cross over into Intune, that might cross over into Azure or M365, and it kind of gets all melted together. But 80% of what you're looking for in that issue, technology, upgrade, proactive services might be SQL. 20% could be anything else.
Help me understand, how unusual is it for a company to offer that senior level of an engineer to an end user, to a company who has that level of experience sort of directly tied to their account? Is that commonplace?
For US Cloud, it is commonplace, but for other organizations, I've been in consulting for 40 years, it's not very common. And what's really nice is, like I said, we merge the reactive and proactive services together to give a complete offering. We also will bring in other technologists if they need to, so that other 20%, bringing in SQL, SharePoint, whatever, Power BI that needs to happen in those tickets. So we kind of do it all.
So give me an example of a time where a DSE who's embedded in a customer account has seen maybe a break fix issue, but has been able to take a look at that and say, okay, like there's something more going on here that we can leverage the intimate knowledge of their infrastructure in.
Yeah, we just had one last week. So the CEO of a very large corporation in the Fortune 100, probably a lower number than 100, was in a Teams meeting, given a presentation, and there was 80 or more people in there, all C-level executives, and they got kicked out of the meeting while they were presenting. So that's not a great optic,
no, not
right?
Good.
I mean, you're at the top of the food chain, and somebody had the ability in that Teams meeting to kick them out. It didn't look very good, so they opened up a Sev 1 case. They had a DSE around Teams. So the Teams DSE was notified by the break fix side because of that internal note that said, hey, Rob is our DSE on this technology. You might want to reach out to them. He hopped on the call, and within the first half hour, analyzed the situation, figured out exactly what went wrong, and helped then do a policy to solve this from happening again in the future. There's no reason that anybody else should be able to kick the CEO off of a call when they're presenting, which is not great. They also decided, we want to have Microsoft take a look at this too. Microsoft came back within 10 minutes of looking at our analysis, which is already done, our project plan and how to do resolution, and said, We wouldn't do anything different. This is exactly how to handle this. So we were able to handle that issue in a very timely fashion, get them back on the call, get the whole thing, and then make sure it didn't happen again in the future.
That's a pretty unique example. Has there been another time recently maybe where that integration of break fix of PRS with the DSEs at US Cloud has proven beneficial for a company?
Yeah, this happens daily. There's a lot of data gathering. When you first get on the phone with somebody, I need to know your story. Why are you calling me? What's going on? What does the environment look like? How many users are impacted? That whole process. So what happens is, again, because of that internal note, a DSE is called and they can give them some background. And a lot of times it really helps narrow down the troubleshooting, because if you and I are new to a conversation, I don't know how many kids you have, so I don't ask you a whole bunch of silly questions. Can your 5-year-old come over and play? And you're like, I have a 12-year-old son. Right. So now we're narrowing those questions down again even more to talk about whether your son likes soccer or baseball. All those things, I already get that from the DSE, and we can just go right through the conversation as to what do they need? Or they need a coach to help them, bring up their RBIs for batting. But we spent a lot of time narrowing it down. The DSE helps us narrow that down a lot quicker.
Well, thank you for using an analogy that even a marketing guy can understand. To extend on that thing, say I don't have those two entities under the same roof. I'm hiring multiple different companies.
Sure.
I'm working directly with Microsoft and maybe getting V-Dash folks involved. What is that experience like? What are the communication issues? What are the time lost issues that happen there?
Yeah, so Microsoft, how they do their escalation support today, they use multiple organizations. And because of privacy acts, a lot of times they are not allowed to share the information. So if a shift goes off, it's now 5 o'clock and their shift is done, they might even shift that escalation ticket to another vendor that can't get some of the data from the first vendor because of privacy issues, because none of them are Microsoft employees. They're all, like you said, VDASH, which stands for vendor. All our employees are US Cloud. So the process on our end is pretty simple. You're going to talk to a DSE or talk to a break fix person. They're all going to be able to talk to each other, share data in a secure fashion that's encrypted endpoint to endpoint, and be able to communicate openly and freely. And then if we need to bring somebody in, so your DSE is on SharePoint, but some of it maybe goes into SQL, then they bring in a SQL person that's an enterprise architect level that can look at the global picture and kind of put the pieces together. Because sometimes it's very complex and it takes multiple sets of eyes from different disciplines to merge to get a solution.
Sure.
It's multiple things.
Yeah.
And then how do we then do that? So we have the capability to bring those teams in. Other escalations take a lot of time with other vendors because they can't bring in those disciplines. They're kind of pigeonholed. Well, I'm the SQL guy. I can only answer SQL. Right. And when I'm done with the case, then you send it over to the SharePoint person. They do their little part. Yeah. And then you go to the Power BI person. And by the time you're doing all that, the clock has been ticking and there's been an issue. Right. Things are not getting resolved.
Yeah. That sounds frustrating.
It is very frustrating. It's not a great experience. Yeah. And it's very difficult to keep track of when do I switch? When do I go from the SQL to the SharePoint to the Power BI? When are we done? And then there's a lot of finger pointing unintentionally, but there's finger pointing. Well, you know what? I think that's probably the SharePoint person. And they use the word probably, which is not great for resolution and problem solving when you're dealing with break fix tickets.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I want definites. I want an answer and I want to get up and running.
Okay, so tell me about the 3 core projects that a US Cloud DSE delivers on.
So we hit on 3 different areas. One of them is customers can hit up and say, I've got a question. There's a new button that just happened in the interface, or there's a new mandate that Microsoft has done and says they're going to sunset something, or something has to be upgraded by a certain time frame. We don't own the cloud, we just rent it. So because we rent it, the landlord can at any time say, you know what, I'm going to paint the walls purple next week. You need to be ready. And we're like, I'm not ready. I still have, paintings on the wall. So I can't make it purple. So they come to us and say, do I need to worry about this? When they make it purple, is that going to affect me? What's going to happen? So that's what we call a project advisory ticket. So they might have the need to just bounce some questions back and forth. Or maybe they have a plan. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to remove the nails, put some spackle up, and then Microsoft can come in and paint it purple. We're good. But how do we prepare for that? Did we miss anything? Right? And then we're like, yeah, there's no tarp for the floor. So when they paint it, that the wall's going to be purple, but some of the floor is going to be purple too, because there's going to be some spillage and some dripping. So those are the types of processes that we help them that's a project advisory. The next thing that we do in consulting services is a full-blown project. Now, we consider a project anything that takes over 15 hours or more to solve. So it might be that we're upgrading 300 servers. It might be that we're going to do some migrations or a merger and acquisition, and we're doing the actual merger part and changing email addresses and moving data and things back and forth. The other thing is with those, we are allowed on our side to do hands-on. So we have full hands-on support. We don't do staff aug, we do consulting aug. So we have intelligent professionals that can help run a process, because a lot of times you run out of time. You told your manager, we're going to have that done by Friday, and you're not going to have it done by Friday because you don't have the time and the professionals that can do it, right? You just don't have, you need more hands, because it takes a village sometimes to do some of these projects because they're big. And so we've got technology consultants and enterprise architects that can step up and do that. And the reason why I say it's consulting aug is because, we do a lot of testing and pilots and everything, but sometimes there's a curveball. There's something different in the account, or there's something going on in the organization that no one's hit until we start running a new process. The last thing that our consulting services does is DSE, like we've already mentioned. So the DSE is our third offering that we have that gives the white glove family experience to the organization to really become embedded as part of an extension of the team, which is nice for customers.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for your time today, Rodney.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.